Okay, great. Well, welcome back everyone to the second session of day 2 or afternoon 2. I'm Enrique Von Rohr here at the Sam Fox School, Director of Research and Technology, and also teaching communication design. I want to just at a high level welcome everybody, but also our panelists today to build on everything that we've been learning about in the past sessions. So Tracy Moore is a designer, and I'm just going to very high level introduce them, but I'm going to let them speak, give us a little longer introduction. But Tracy Moore is a designer here in the local community, longtime collaborator, and also involved in teaching and many other things. Great networker, so many hats. Noah MacMillan is an illustrator, also an alum of the program. Great work here in the local area as well. Rachel Youn is an artist here in St. Louis, also works at the Sam Fox School, so wearing many hats there as well. And Elizabeth Beier, is Elizabeth with us yet? So we'll let Elizabeth join us as soon as she's on. Here she is. So Elizabeth is joining us as well from San Francisco area, I believe, in California, and also an alum of our program and an illustrator, launching her own business. So what I'd like to do is first have each one of our panelists give us a few minutes of an introduction about yourself, your freelance business and path, maybe the type of work that you're doing now and what you love to do. So maybe why don't we start off with Tracy, if that's good.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tracy Moore, graphic designer. See, I've been a designer since, I'm gonna date myself here. I've been a designer since around 1994, and I owned my own business solely for about 17 years. I do a lot of branding, print, things like that, and I'm trying to think of what I taught it at Sam Fox for 11 years. Actually, I had the pleasure of teaching Noah MacMillan there. And currently, I'm doing a few different things, including some teaching out at Maryville, but I also primarily do design work for some local nonprofits and a few companies in the area. Not sure if you want me to give anything more, Enrique, or if we can.
That's good. We can dive into other topics. We have a whole set of questions. Yeah, we can keep going. How about Noah?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Noah MacMillan. I have been working as a freelance illustrator for about 7 or 8 years at this point, which is incredible. Right after I graduated, I spent a couple years working at a company called Explain and then a company called Kendio, which were both sort of design illustration companies in St. Louis. And then went out on my own from there, and I've been working in a variety of editorial and marketing and advertising, and then also a little bit of storyboarding and video game development work since then. So I've had a bit of a kind of jack of all trades career within the illustration, and I'm just very happy to be here and thrilled to answer any questions, and great to see some familiar faces.
Okay, great. Thank you, Noah. How about Rachel?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Youn. I'm excited to be here. I'm an artist in St. Louis. So I graduated from WashU in 2017. So it's been several years now. So I maintain a practice and a studio in Ferguson and show both locally and nationally as of late, and actually was briefly a student of Noah's too when I first started at WashU. So that's really cool. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, great. How about Elizabeth? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Great.
Great. Well, I graduated WashU in 2012 and actually took some classes with Noah, hello, and Enrique as well, and Ben. So great to see some familiar faces too. I live in the Bay Area now. I'm an illustrator, an animator, and something called graphic facilitator, which means like scribing meetings live, making some visual notes and sketches that go along with them in a corporate setting. And I live in the Bay Area, and I started very recently. So I'm sort of the newcomer to the freelance world. I just got out of a series, well, two full-time jobs that I did for several years in the illustration design space. So I'm sort of just starting out and very happy to be here with the newbie's perspective.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to our panel. Great to have you here. So I guess just some ground rules for. So I have a set of questions that I'm going to ask the panel. But all of you in the audience, if there are questions, please put them in the chat as we're going along. I'm going to be building on some of the conversations that we've been having, but feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to read through and pick them up as we're going along. So I'll ask my questions, but then we'll save a little time towards the end for more for reading some of your questions and just having more open conversation about freelancing. So I guess I'll open this up to whomever wants to take this first question. But one of the topics that Ben Franklin was talking about yesterday was really setting your goals and objectives in starting your freelance business. And Elizabeth, maybe this is maybe I'll pick on you first, since you've just started sort of and formulating your practice. And maybe you can talk about, so what were your sort of like, what was your thinking instead of like, okay, I'm going to launch off into the space. What was some of the objectives and goals to do this?
Sure. I mean, number one, it was, of course, to support myself financially. So sort of thinking to myself, like, do I have the network and to, successfully get enough clients and like the competitive skill sets to work in the world. But it was also to just step away from, I found in my full-time jobs, my main frustration was that I felt both like parts of the job were too difficult and not within my skill set, or just sort of straight up boring. And at the same time that I wasn't being fully utilized, like my real strengths and what I could bring to the table was never called upon. And also that there was a ceiling to what I could earn. And, I was going to get a, maybe 2%, 4% raise if I did really, really well. But, even if I completely knocked it out of the park, there would be no real difference in my salary. So I guess the baseline floor of my goal was, sort of make it and support myself. But beyond that, my bigger goal was, make a name for myself doing the specific things that I really love to do. The scribing, the animating, the illustration, the comics, and just let that other stuff, like the things that I didn't like, fall by the wayside, and to also be able to potentially earn more and set my own rates and work my own hours and be able to just get up and go for a long walk whenever I saw fit during the day without anybody looking over or expecting me on the call.
Okay, great. Somebody else want to jump in? Noah?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo a lot of what Elizabeth just said. I think I sort of had some experiences early on where I felt like the work that I was being given in a job setting was like very, very strictly defined to just being a person who can draw a little thing that is within a much bigger plan that other people have already envisioned, which was totally fine because I was really young and right out of school, and that's probably what I needed and deserved. But I felt like if I was sort of running my own show, I would have a lot more ability to sort of come up with projects and set the sort of scope and vision of my own projects, and just have more control over the kind of work that I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's sort of true. Certainly, it is still very dependent, unfortunately, on sort of what comes in the door on a month-to-month basis. So there are still months where I'm doing a lot of work that I'm not enormously psyched about, but it is, it's what pays the bills. However, I would say overall, I've been able to sort of steer my own ship in the direction of topics and fields that sort of interest me more. And I think that I've been able to sort of have more influence generally on the type of work that I'm doing. So that was a big draw. And like Elizabeth said, being able to go for a walk in the middle of the day is pretty cool.
Great. Okay, Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, so I don't know, as I've been like listening, I don't know if what I do necessarily counts as freelance, because it's not like the main way I actually support myself. Like you mentioned, like I work at Sam Fox, so I actually do work like a 9-to-5 desk job. And so for me, my studio practice, my goal really is to just like keep growing it, and whatever that means. It's not necessarily like move to New York and like be a famous artist and like, quit my full-time job. It's like letting art, give me excuses to like keep learning things and trying new skills, to like constantly being applying to more things, to go to residencies, to meet people. And I think a lot of that is because when you work like a 9-to-5 job, like it is easy to kind of feel stagnant, and it's easier to do nothing than to go to the studio and make art. So for me, having like, a freelance business or being an artist is just like my way of existing. And I just want to like make sure that continues to grow.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I guess just in the past sessions we've been talking about. I mean, that was one of the suggestions. I think whether you have sort of a couple jobs, or some sort of a day job and then another job. So that's certainly in the mix of the portfolio of things that you can think about in your strategy, right? That maybe going out right off the bat isn't quite right, and some of you have already alluded to doing that. So that's great. Tracy.
Yeah, so I think mine is a little bit of a mix of all those. Again, like I said, started a little while before many of these artists started. But the few things were really sort of setting my own schedule. I grew up the child of an entrepreneur, and I think my ability to sit at a desk from 8:30 to 5 was a little bit of a challenge for me. If you love a job, it's great because you can do it. But if you have that sort of spirit, I think it's a little bit easier to do freelance. Now, saying that, you have to have the guts and the stomach for it, because there are those days where you're not sure where the money or the project's coming in. But I also wanted to take a little bit of control of my work, what I was doing, and be able to focus it and really just kind of lend myself to the community as well. I think for me, I had a little bit of an part of me that wanted to be a role model in some ways. There are very few in St. Louis or in other cities, designers of color, and that was a really big thing for me that I really liked, sort of having that ability to have that role, especially in St. Louis. And so there was part of that as well. So I think there were kind of a mix of things, and I love what Elizabeth said, the walk. I live in U City and we have a great pool, and some days I just wanted to go to the pool for a couple of hours. So I would just do that instead of, that was like pre-cell phone too. So it would just be like me by the pool, not having to answer the phone for a little while. It was a really joy for me. So I think there were a few of those things that all mixed together.
Okay, great. So definitely a lifestyle thread here in all of your responses. So okay, great. Well, there's a couple questions here from Ben. Maybe I'll piggyback on that before going on to sort of in sort of the spirit of starting out, right? Where there's sort of like unexpected hurdles that you sort of had to like overcome right off the bat, sort of in your process, where they could be any number of things.
For me, there were several things that you would not necessarily think about. I am not a money person. So one of the things that I'll say is a big hurdle, and if we have a list of sort of things to do before you start freelancing, is to set yourself up properly for being a 1099 employee, essentially, and understanding what that means. And I know that that sort of takes the glamour away from being a freelancer. Like, I think people feel like you're just this kind of jet setting, like sitting around on the couch with your laptop doing whatever, but it's a business. And so I know you have a lot of people on here who are also, business students or things like that, where it is imperative for you to learn those things that make you uncomfortable. And then I think also putting yourself out there to get the work. Like, I'm a networking person. I think you said that, Enrique. Ben and I are friends as well. Nicole, to me, it's like putting yourself out there and really letting people know what you do and making sure that they're aware of your work is a challenge that sometimes I think you don't expect. People don't come knocking at your door the first couple years that you're doing this. You have to put yourself out there. So those are the things that I would say were hurdles. And then again, for me, I don't really say that that was an issue, but I did have one experience where being a designer of color, I had a client that, or a potential client, that wasn't really sure of my work. And I thought that was really interesting. The way she phrased it was subtle, but it was pretty clear. And so I think, once I got a name for myself, it was very different. But that was a little bit of a hurdle that I don't know if I expected or not.
Okay, great. Any others?
I get just sort of briefly, I think one thing that I didn't sort of realize, and it's sort of connected to what Tracy was just saying, is that how much of a freelancing career in illustration, or I think probably in design or fine art also, I would imagine, just comes down to sort of relationships and being able to confidently speak with clients and sort of describe your ideas and have a group of people who are ready to say to another person that they trust, this is a person that you could go to for this type of work. And I think one sort of, I won't even say it's a choice, because I think if I had had the money to move to New York the moment I graduated, I would have done so. But I, by staying in St. Louis for like a number of years, I think, first of all, my overhead was much lower than a lot of my friends who immediately moved to much bigger cities. And I think I was able to sort of get to know a much bigger chunk of people within the sort of design illustration world, and essentially be trusted by people to sort of take on projects and challenges. And so that's one of these things that I look back in retrospect and say, oh, it's really good that basically I made that choice, even though, like I said, it wasn't really a conscious choice probably, but I think it definitely set me up in a much more positive way than a lot of my friends who, moved to San Francisco, immediately had to be working 70 hours a week in order to just pay their rent. And I was able to sort of go along getting 1 or 2 freelance gigs a month, making, not a whole lot of money for the first couple of years, but sort of laying the groundwork and like building a portfolio and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. Like, I think kind of a tough thing was watching friends like move away and kind of start to live these seemingly glamorous lives in big cities. And I decided to stay for like financial like stability reasons, but also because I spent time in undergrad like making connections within the St. Louis art scene, and it seemed like kind of a shame to just like abandon all those and just plop myself into a totally new pool. So location is one of them too, and of course that a lot of that has to do with like the glamorization of like um, of these bigger cities. But there are like so many opportunities like wherever you live too. I would say one of the a hurdle that I experienced kind of early on was kind of a logistical one, which was like finding a studio and a space to work. And I think that applies to like no matter whether you work in your home or like you rent out a place, but like setting boundaries and like setting a schedule for yourself can be really important depending on how you work. If you're like me and like are like very willy-nilly about your day and like procrastinate a lot, like making sure to like be intentionally like setting time to work and coming home from work, eating dinner, and then just being like, we're going to go to studio, even if it's for a couple hours. And doing that is important because otherwise it's easy to let the time kind of get away from you. So, and I think that that counts again, like even if your studio or your desk space is in your home, like you have to bring a level of professionalism to it.
Okay.
I would say for me, one of the surprises, I decided to set myself up as an LLC company because of the corporate clients that I have for my scribing graphic facilitation business. I just wanted to have that title next to my name, and I read that it would make taxes a little bit simpler, and I was like, thank goodness, for that. And one of the things that sort of surprised me right off the bat was how expensive it was to just get started. Like, I turned in my work computer. I needed a new computer. That's, money out the bat. Then I needed to pay for my own Adobe. And the application to form my LLC was expensive. And then I kept getting envelopes in the mail that said, actually, there's this other fee that's another couple $100s. And it was just like, woof, like I had put aside a certain amount of money and been like, okay, when I reach this amount, I'm going to go out on my own. And then a bigger chunk of that money went out the window sort of immediately than I anticipated, just getting myself set up. And so that was a bit painful. But in the end, I believe worth it, as Tracy said, to get set up in the way that I want to be set up personally for the future. It's sort of worth that investment to whether you choose to be an LLC or some other way of setting yourself up to just sort of make a decision, this is my business structure and these are the tools that I need, and kind of go for it. I think is the right thing. Because like down the line, if you have a machine that like fails every time you try to run Illustrator and Photoshop at the same time, you're going to lose so much productivity time overall. And then the other thing that I find that sort of echoing what Rachel said about being rigorous with scheduling and oneself is that I think like many artistically inclined people, my moods really go up and down. And so I have some days that I jump out of bed with excitement to start my day and do my work and, take care of my life administration and do my proposals and sales. It's so exciting. And I have other days that I'm just like, well, how soon can I go back to sleep? Like, what's on Netflix? And you just really have to keep the energy and the momentum up to, I think even more so than when you have a full-time job. Like sometimes with a full-time job, you can kind of coast and be like, well, if I'm turning in everything on time and showing up to all the meetings, then it's sort of all right. But if you're freelance, you kind of just have to
You're the
just
boss.
keep going even when you don't feel super, is my experience.
Right.
Can I just say, like, I want to like just jump on what Elizabeth just said, that being a freelancer or self-employed is not easy. So I think a lot of people feel like there is an ease to it that comes with that lifestyle. And I think that the trade in is that sometimes you're working harder than if you have a full-time job in order to get that lifestyle. And so, there's things that you trade off in that. And I think that you really have to, and I also agree with Rachel on like setting that discipline of whether it's your office in your house or a separate office, which worked better for me, was to give yourself those hours, because clients will also take advantage of that. If they realize that you're sending them emails at 11:30 at night, they expect that you'll answer the phone at 11:30 at night.
Right. Okay, good. So I'm going to jump over to some of the questions in the chat here that do relate to some of the ones that I was asking, and I guess to build off of our last session, it was all about negotiation. Is there a time when negotiation is appropriate? Like, I guess when you're, this is maybe pivoting a little bit to sort of into the meat of relationships with clients and projects. When is that? What's your feeling about that and negotiating, and when is it the right time? Experience with that?
Well, I think it's always appropriate. Basically, I sort of think that every time you have a new relationship with a client or a new project, you sort of are in the position of having to like build trust with that person, and I think that, sort of surprisingly, being a little bit more hard ass about negotiation on the front end winds up building a little bit more trust with your client, that you are sort of a business person who can be depended on. And I think often when I have been projects that I've had that have sort of gone off the rails in different ways, often it starts with me not defining super clearly what we're doing, or being a little bit of a pushover, because I think, either it's a friend of a friend, or it's a small sort of mom and pop type of thing, and I say, oh, it's fine, I'll just do it for whatever your budget is, and then you sort of find yourself being taken advantage of, because you've set up that precedent that essentially you're the boss and I'm just the person who's gonna do what you say, as opposed to if you sort of start from the beginning as, this is going to be a negotiation, this is going to be a partnership, you're hiring me because I'm an expert. You sort of put yourself in a position to define the process, I think, a little bit better, and so that trust winds up paying off when it comes to creative decisions, I think.
Okay, great. Okay, maybe that's a great answer. If others want to jump in, but maybe we'll take another question here. Well, Taylor, do you want to say what your question is? It sounds like a long question. Maybe it relates to some of what we've been discussing so far.
Yeah, sure. This is for anybody, but maybe especially for Noah, just because it's something you just said about moving, and Rachel, you were talking about this too. I mean, so I'm a grad student. I'm finishing school soon, and I'm sort of thinking about where to move to. And no, I was really interested that you said you stayed here for a while, built up your portfolio, and then went to New York. I want to know about, what has been different since going to New York. Since I'm in grad school, I'm kind of already in that position of, I feel like I have built up my body of work and I have that experience already. But it seems to me that wherever you live, you're just going to end up having more and more opportunities in that area. And I feel kind of afraid of picking the wrong area or getting stuck with just like too much opportunity in a place that I don't know if I want to be. And if anyone could speak about experience of, making a move or kind of taking a hit to your like quote unquote like network or like people in an area to go to a new area, weighing that decision out of school or at all. I'm really thinking about that a lot lately. So any advice would be really appreciated.
Well, I guess I can talk to it a little bit. Like I said, I think it's easy to sort of take for granted the extent of a network that you have, especially coming out of a place like WashU with all of the different teachers that you've had and the connections that they have or are willing to share with you. I even once I moved away from St. Louis, I actually wound up flying back to St. Louis for jobs on a number of occasions and continuing to do work through people there. And so I just found that it's a much smaller pond in a really useful way. Like the amount of people doing the type of illustration work that I'm doing in St. Louis, it's like I kind of know all of them, versus in a place like Los Angeles or San Francisco, there's 1,500 people ahead of you, essentially in the queue of trying to be, working for the New Yorker or for Facebook or for Google. Which is not to say that you're not better and won't get those opportunities, but it is to say that it's harder. And if someone's coming to look for, I need an illustrator in this city, it's going to be tougher to be the person who pops up in that situation. And so, I think that it takes, your question about when you make that move, I think it takes a couple of years. And so I think, frankly, I have not yet seen the benefits from being in a bigger city outweigh the costs associated with that move. And I think it's happening gradually as I'm sort of like meeting more people and getting my name out there. But I think every time you move, it's probably going to be 3-5 years of just sort of meeting new people before you sort of have that sort of embedded network that you maybe already have. And so again, just what your overhead cost is and how much time you have that you think you can invest in that process is something that it's important to sort of figure out.
And Taylor, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I was just gonna say one quick thing that I've learned. I am a native St. Louis, and so leaving was definitely something that I thought about after college and other times along the way. And I have my own reasons for staying. I think St. Louis is a great sort of center of the country, and you can, especially in this time, you can work in all different kinds of places, but have a home somewhere else. I would, this sort of sounds a little like lofty, philosophical, like touchy feely, but find a place that you really love to live. Like where you're going to work and get your business, you can develop that and grow it, but like find the place that you really want to live, because your work is your work and you're going to want to do that, but you're also going to want to do other things. So I think, I agree with Noah on like cost of living and things like that, where St. Louis is great for that. But if your heart is in another city or something like that, then you will find and grow that network that you need.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm a native Californian, and my family, it's important to me to live near my family. And so, here I am in the Bay Area and when I first started, I thought like, well, should I move someplace cheaper? And for me, the answer was no, because of the community that I have here and sort of my love for the day-to-day experience of the area. But I live in a co-op with 4 people, who I love dearly. And so there are some ways, even if you do live in a bigger city, if you choose that as a home, to make it work. Like if I moved to a cheaper city and lived by myself, it might actually be a comparable amount to my fifth of the rent. Who knows? And so if you find yourself someplace bigger for heart related reasons, there are still ways to find other artists who are in a similar situation and band together and get that overhead down. I would also say that, yeah, echoing that COVID is a remarkable time in terms of virtual work. The one really San Francisco TM job that I have right now is with Salesforce. And I did not get that by walking down the street and, meeting somebody from Salesforce. I got it from a connection who works in Chicago, who was friends with somebody that worked at Salesforce, who I knew from doing an engagement with them in London. And so it was very roundabout. But, you know, if there's one thing that is a silver lining to COVID, it's that people are used to working with people that they're not in a room with face to face. And so it could be easier to grow geographically dispersed professional network.
Okay, great. I don't know, Rachel, did you want to jump in there or should we jump on to another question?
I would just echo the same thing. Like, I feel like COVID time has presented like oddly some opportunities for just like doing virtual studio visits, or just connecting with people more so like even like on Instagram. And I think, you know, you can start building that network, you know, in New York or San Francisco or wherever you want to move to. Even now, like living in St. Louis, and you actually might be more of like a novelty because you're like from the Midwest. I don't know, like that's something you can work to your advantage too. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, great. I guess from my own experience, I'll say when I and I'm a WashU alum also, and I left to go to New York, and I said I'm going to go to New York for 1 year, and then I'm going to go somewhere else for another year, and I'm going to go somewhere else for another. It did not work that way. I wanted to join the rat race. It takes a long time to join, and then all of a sudden you say like, oh gosh, I have roots here, and like I really know, and then maybe it's time to go. But okay, moving on to another question maybe. So I'm going to combine a couple of my questions here around talking a bit about your brand or your you know, the type of work that you want to do, and maybe combine that with the skills that you have and who do you go after? Like, do you cast a wide net? Do you sort of focus in on a particular niche? What, you know, how do you choose, you know, where you're going to show your work, you know, who you're going to reach out to? Can you speak to a little bit about maybe those sort of interconnected things in your brand? Maybe start with Rachel.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know if it's like different for like being a fine artist, but I kind of let the connections like come naturally. And I want to stress that like part of like your branding and like your skills is also like how you treat people and like whether they see you as like a genuine person to work with. I think like people are pretty good at like sniffing out when you're like just talking to them for like an opportunity or like for an exhibition opportunity. And that's, you know, just been like what I've told myself, like I'm just gonna like be myself, but like for real, like be nice to people and like treat people with respect. And like I feel like, and you know, and continue to make good work. And then I feel like through that, you know, people have like reached out to me and I've had to spend less time like, you know, sitting around like sending like kind of applications like out into the dark, you know, to just like random galleries and places that I don't know and spending like $35 on all these application fees. Like, you know, I think the most fulfilling opportunities have come through actually just connecting with like the community I'm part of.
I would agree that I think, you know, what you're saying, Rachel, is so true. Just the idea of reputation. One of the best things you can do is develop your reputation as part of your brand, and not burning bridges for small things and doing things that are really keep your name. I mean, that's always one of the top things my father will always say to me is don't burn bridges, because you as a professional, that is part of your reputation. Stick by what you say you're going to do. And if you can't do it, make sure you're forthright and tell someone why. Even if it's just something like missing a deadline, you know, be upfront and honest about it. If you develop your reputation, that becomes part of your brand, and that's really really important. And then you find things coming to you instead of having to chase things.
I would say from my experience, and again, I'm relatively new, so this might change, but sort of realizing what platform of the various social medias work best for you. And obviously it's good to post on all of them, like Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Instagram, but gosh, there's, without either spending so much time on it or paying for like a monthly subscription to Hootsuite or something like that, it's really difficult to be full on in every single social lane. So for me, I sort of chose LinkedIn. Other people really excel in Instagram, but just sort of see where the people with the decision making abilities seem to be, and just really sort of hustle in that space is a recommendation that I would have. And part of what I mean by hustle is sort of posting work and reaching out to people and saying, hey, I see that you do this type of work. Maybe, I do this type of work. Maybe we could work together. But it's also about, I think that part of your brand could be lifting up and sharing the work of other artists that do similar work or that you just really love, and saying, hey, this person did a great job. Check out their work too. Because it gives people a flavor of what you're interested in and what your wheelhouse might be. And it makes it seem more like you're just an expert in your field, having a good time online rather than a hustler. And it's also just an uplifting thing to do and makes other people more likely to recommend you as well. Another just insider tip about LinkedIn in particular is that if some of my work has come through people commenting on my posts, and then other people can then see my post because they're friends with that person. So if you can phrase your post in such a way, like as a question that encourages other people to comment, then that can work out.
And I guess as a plug for Elizabeth, I thought of her because I was on LinkedIn and I saw her post and I was like, oh yes, that's who I want to talk to. That's a great person. So finding a great tip on, reaching out to sort of the unconventional social media places that are out there. So Noah, were you gonna chime in there?
Yeah. So my one little thing to add is that I think it's really useful to try to find little niches of things that you're really excited about that lots of other artists or designers aren't necessarily as excited about. For me, I grew up playing soccer. I was a big soccer player, continue to be a huge soccer fan. And at a certain point, I started trying to find illustration work in that field. And I just felt like there was so much less resistance, basically, because there are so few people who have that sort of Venn diagram of interests, that it almost gets back to the sort of like small community thing again, of like finding that niche of people who are into talking about the same things. And most of you probably would have no interest in that, but there's probably something comparable that you're into. I think I didn't really think of that as like a legitimate venue for work at first, because it wasn't like super intellectual or designy, but it's work, and it's stuff that I'm spending my time watching soccer games and yelling about it on the internet. And so I'm sort of seeing people, I'm seeing people in that world, and they're sort of seeing me and realizing that it's sort of an authentic part of my personality. And so it's sort of like every time I'm like yelling about a soccer game on Twitter, I'm sort of marketing in a weird way, because I'm reminding people that I am thinking about this stuff. And so I think if you can identify those things about yourself that all of your classmates aren't interested in, that's like a super useful thing to nail down.
Okay, great. Yeah, that came up a little bit with Julia Quo yesterday, and those kinds of things that you do above and beyond the client relationships that can really fuel your interest in your work in other ways, and maybe surprising ways. So I in the chat, Grace posts a question, and maybe this is a bit of a lifestyle thing, and sort of the being lonely. Is freelancing lonely? Is it how do you, and again, I guess also gets to Elizabeth's idea of energy, and waking up in the morning and deciding what you're going to do. How do you feeding off energy of other people? But at the root of it, sort of a lifestyle question about, is it lonely? And I guess I'll maybe dovetail with another question that I was thinking about, is the rewarding aspects of the practice, of what you're doing, and the way you've chosen to sort of curate or structure your business, right? So, Tracy?
Well, I guess the first part about sort of the lonely part, I know that all of the people that I've, that know me here know that I'm a social person. I'm kind of definitely an extrovert. And so, but I do enjoy having that sort of peace and the time to do things when I'm working that I don't necessarily have in an office. I think I would probably be overly social if I was in that space. But there's so many other organizations and other ways that you can and find that outlet. I mean, I'm a big fan of AIGA, other organizations that you can join, that you can really connect with people that are like you, that have your same interest. You don't have to just do that through work. And so I think that that's a big thing that you need to do, is sort of seek the energy from others in different ways, or even partnering in projects. You can definitely do that, and you get the choice when you're a freelancer as to who you're partnering with. So that's a huge thing. And then what was the other part of your question, Enrique? Sorry.
Well, just the rewarding aspects of what you do. It could be financial, it could be the social aspects, building community. Like, is there a rewarding sort of point?
Yeah, I mean, when you get to see your work, like your work that you've done, completed, whether it be a piece of some other project or it's the entire thing, there's some serious self, like, you increase your self-worth in your own mind, I guess, by saying like, look what I did. I mean, it's just a really great feeling that you have, that you can get it when you work for someone else, for sure, when you see your work, but you need to look more at that as a collective a lot of times. And so if you really want to do some things that are they're really, something that you're going to feel good about, it's great doing it when you're a freelancer.
I would say, I worked at one job for 3 years and then another job for 4 years. And I always found those social relationships to be both rewarding and also just really hard. My last job was in corporate consulting, and there was a big culture of like, yeah, we just killed it. Let's go for steak and martinis and, get super drunk and, literal steak and martinis. And it was really hard to know, like, are these folks my friends? Can I really get drunk and share my real truths with them? Is that going to come back and bite me in the ass? Like, and especially being the most junior person there and being a woman, often the answer was no, like, that's not a good idea. And so, and then the other thing that you find out when you leave a job is that a lot of the people who you thought were your close friends, are not. They're people that you share a workspace with and who are being civil. And like, for people like me that are super social, it can be really sad to stomach that the people that I'm spending so much time with are not actually my homies. And so I would say that since beginning to freelance, I was really worried about that, but I've actually found myself less lonely because I'm not investing so much in those. Like, I still have people that I worked with who actually genuinely are my friends, who I will always appreciate and love. And just knowing that most of the people that I work with, it's on a purely transactional, friendly, but like not BFF basis, is kind of refreshing and allows me more time to invest in my genuine relationships in my life.
That's great. Okay.
I guess to answer these questions too, I don't know. I actually like really find a lot of fulfillment in my day job. Like, it's not something like I'm like hating and trudging to get through to like go to my studio, like, and that can be a challenge too, because then like, you know, how do I split my energies between these like two things I'm really dedicated to? But I don't know, I like just like working kind of like a normal job because it kind of like still tethers me to like some sort of like reality that I feel like a lot of people like understand. And it's super easy, like especially in fine arts, to be like super sucked into like a very insular world and like a totally different reality for that reason. So I don't know, I like enjoy just having coworkers and just talking about random stuff. But I would say like social media is a great way to connect with other people, especially like in COVID time where like you literally just can't see anybody, and virtual connection is a lot of what we have. Of course, like having, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like it's both a source of inspiration because everybody's always posting about these things that they're making, but at the same time it can feel very toxic because you know, it seems like everybody else is always working, and sometimes you can't do that, and you feel like you're not doing enough. So I would echo like what Noah was saying, like indulge yourself in like the other things you like too. Like don't just follow all art things or design things and like let that only be your feed, because really that's like where all the rich content in your like work comes from, is like the other things you're interested in. So it's like I like fishing, so I like follow fishing pages, or like I enjoy the Lord of the Rings, so I follow like meme groups about it. And it's like it doesn't have to feed into my art necessarily, but I think it's important to just like keep your feed well balanced and not just get too engrossed in just like one part of the art world.
Okay, great. And we're building community here. So, you know, this is a networking opportunity that we're going to have in a minute here. But maybe as we go out, maybe quickly, just can you is there a risk? Let's see, how do I want to frame this? I guess talk about some risk that you took that really paid off in some way, and it doesn't have to be financial. It could just be something you really sort of stretched to really try and was successful. Maybe keep it to a quickly there, because we're gonna break a little before the top of the hour.
I can tell you about, just briefly, an opportunity, and this is sort of about seizing the opportunities when they come. When I started my corporate job, I had, you know, moved to San Jose, was very busy. I was like, okay, well, for the first year, I'm just going to be head down in this job. And then I got an email from somebody who said that they had, due to a series of events, like a limited time opportunity to publish my graphic novel if I could make 100 new pages within a couple of months. And I was like, halfway through the email, that was like, no, I can't do that. I just started a new job a month and a half ago, and I, you know, work with a bunch of sharks, and I'm going to get fired. But then I was like, yo, this might not come up again. And so I sat with it for a few days and decided to do it. And that was an insane summer, but I'm so glad that I did, because my book is my pride and joy. And so that was a risk, but it paid off.
Awesome.
I'll say something practical that was kind of a risk for me. It's a lot easier to work in your house when you don't have anything to pay for a space. And I kept seeing a sign for a little office, and you say that was just this, you know, it wasn't that expensive, but it was bigger than my budget, I thought. And I thought the peace of mind of actually having a space to go to work and actually have more structure was really important for me. So I went ahead and did it, signed a lease, and it was probably one of the best things I did. You could grow into that. And I just felt like that was a risk, and it paid off for me.
So I guess like kind of the more, my first thought, like first answer to that question would be, you know, like sinking money into an art practice that I didn't know was going to like pay off to any degree, and just being like, this is like what I love, so like I will just do it. And you know, people spend money on hobbies and things they love anyway. And you know, that ended up turning into some really great opportunities, and it kind of paid itself off. But I guess like something that felt like a risk at the time was actually saying no to the first thing. Like I think coming out of school, like I was just like, I must seize like every single opportunity that comes my way, whether it is paid or unpaid or like only pays like $100 or something. Um, and there was just like a time where like I was working on my biggest project, which is a show at the Contemporary Art Museum. And then I was supposed to do like another solo show like before that. And you know, that's like a great opportunity to have, but I knew that at that point I was like going to be stretched super thin, and so it was really really hard to say no. And I emailed this like long paragraph being like, I'm so sorry, like I cannot take on this opportunity, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, that's fine. And you know, it was totally okay. And it felt really bad at that time. And you know, I was like, what, you know, what opportunities did I not get to, or I don't know, like this could have turned into something else, right? There's always that thought. But I did save myself like a lot of grief and a lot of like probably really horrible, like sleep deprived days and nights. And for that reason, I got to focus all of my energy on the bigger project, the thing that I really, really wanted to tackle. So that's important too, like, you know, especially when you're starting out and you're like, you have this complex of being an emerging artist or designer and you feel like you must take everything on, is at some point you do have to start picking your battles, because you know, if you're lucky enough to have a lot of things thrown your way, sometimes you won't be able to do them all or give it your best shot for each one.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll end it there. Noah, you can chime in on the networking section. But this is great. Thank you guys